Hey, this is Tony here. I've got another video that's going to do a getting started using the new Kepler open source planet imaging processing software that runs on macOS, Linux, and Windows. I'm going to spend about 5 or 10 minutes processing some Mars images and showing you some of the capabilities of Kepler. Let's get started. I've already got my Mars image opened. It's a result of a video that was aligned and stacked and then outputted as an image file ready for Kepler to process. And you can see here the view that we have is we've got an original view, a process view. And if I click here on the process view, we can see that we automatically get a magnified view of the image as well. So let's get started. The first thing in the workflow here is you'll see a series of tabs that go along the top here. The idea with Kepler is to keep a fairly simple chronological workflow that you can follow on your images. So we don't get too complicated with Kepler. Let's get started. The first thing I do is I'm going to click on the auto size filter. That helps me determine what sharpen filters to apply as I do my layers. So I'm going to sharpen on the first layer here. I'm going to set it to about 100, and you can see straight away we get an impact on the image. Next one down, I'll do about half of that, so about, let's say, 50 on the slider. And then for layer 3, let's go to about 25. You'll notice in Kepler, there's different options that you can select. There's different color models you can select here. There's different filter types that you can select as well. I'm just going to go by the defaults for the purposes of this demonstration. The other thing you can do as well, if you want to, is you can apply what's called a color denoise. And what I mean by that is if I go in and click on the views here, if I click on the S view, you can see that if I uncheck color denoise, there's definitely some noise in that's color related. So I'm going to click on that, and you see it does a reduction of that color, the color noise. So I'm going to leave that selected. I'll go back to RGB up here. One thing I've noticed is now, after all that sharpening, we've got some artifacts that have appeared in the planet. So we're going to go ahead into the next tab, which is the FFT denoise. I'm going to enable that. I'm going to click on auto denoise, and you can see straight away some of that noise is being reduced. I'm not saying that when you click on auto denoise, that should be your final setting. You can play around with these sliders as well and the aggressiveness, but it seems like it's done a fairly good job in this particular example. One thing I might do as well is I may rotate the image. So I'll have the polar cap at the top, just so it's kind of just for your eyes, just kind of easy to look at. So let's go ahead and we'll click here on the 90 degrees, and it rotates. Maybe a little bit too much. I can use the mouse wheel here just to dial that back a bit, and we'll just leave it like that for the time being. The next thing is I can go into the RGB settings, and I can click on RGB color balance and auto white balance. And so Mars is a little unique because it's got as we all know, a fairly red color. So what I can do is I can bring some of that color back in to the image by clicking this slider here on the gain. So I'm going to put it to about 60. So we have that nice red color. I can also play around with saturations as well. If I go all the way to the right, it becomes really, really saturated. We don't want that. If I double click, it'll go back to the defaults. We'll leave it like this for now. Definitely play around with this for yourself. The other things under the tools tab, so the next part of the workflow, I can do a deconvolution on the image. So check that. And if I increase these strength here, you see there's a very subtle sharpening that's taking place on the planet's surface. And if I click on use contrast as well, which kind of weights the sharpening towards some of the high contrast edges and increase that just a little bit. To my eyes, it's kind of hard to tell the difference because the scene conditions weren't great for this capture, but it's made a slight difference, I think. One of the interesting things with Mars, on my captures at least, is sometimes I get this kind of blue fringing around the edges. So there's a capability here in Kepler called dehaze. And if I click on that, And if I increase the amount, maybe up to about 0.85, you can see there that blue fringe has been reduced. So that's a nice capability in Kepler. You can also play around with the curve settings as well. So if I want to sort of darken some of the areas and then brighten some of the areas, just like you would in, say, Photoshop or GIMP or Affinity, you can do the levels and curve settings. And then there's a local contrast enhancement. So if I click on that, and maybe you can see there straight away as I clicked on it that it went pretty aggressive. Let's dial that back a bit on this. Let's go down to 0.01. So it's not as aggressive. And even that seems quite a bit. So maybe dial this back here as well on the clip limit. So not quite as aggressive. If I uncheck it, you can see that it kind of goes back to what it was. I think for the purpose of this demonstration, I'll just leave it unchecked. Now, the next thing is I wanted to call out is in this Mars image, you'll notice on the you reset here. You notice on the right hand side of the planet here, there is this rind effect, almost like at the upper left. In Kepler, there's what's called a de-rind tool, and if I enable that and then show you the de-rind mask, so basically what it's doing is it's taking a mask, and anything under the mask, it will apply a blur, if you will. And so if I click on this, click on Auto Edge, so that will kind of help me determine where the edge should be. The other interesting thing as well is, well, the rind effect is only around here. So I have this ability to click on where the arc of the mask is going to start and finish. So I'm using my mouse wheel here just to dial this back. Gone a bit too far, actually. And so where we have it to start and then where we have it to end. So I'm going to go to around, let's see here. So this is the end point. So let's leave it to about there. That looks about right to me. And then for the, excuse me, that's a start point. And then for the end point, let's just change this as well. So we'll increase this value. What we're trying to do is we're trying to isolate the mask just over that rind area. So let's go to about there. And now if I disable this show the rind mask, and then if I click on enable and disable, so disable, you can see that rind is definitely kind of impacted. So let's enable it again. And maybe we'll play around with some of these numbers. So I might increase the edge a little bit on the mask, and then maybe increase the smoothing just a little tiny bit. And then how far that mask goes into the planet's limb, or into the planet's surface, excuse me, I'll maybe select that. Now let's look at the mask after those settings, what it's done. So you can see what it's done is it's broadened the mask, smooth the edge, and brought it in a little bit into the planet's surface. And so let's disable that, and then let's disable the de-rind so you can see the difference there. So it's subtle, but I think it's it has a pretty good capability in Kepler. There are always other ways you can do this. I've used Photoshop, where I've used layer masks and blur edges to do a similar thing. But that's what I'm going to do right now, just for this Mars image. So the next thing we're going to go to is batch mode. So interestingly, in Kepler, what you can do is you can apply all of these settings to all the other images that you captured. And so let's go ahead and let's go add the rest of the images. Open those. And I'm going to say align the disks to a common center. Expand the canvas to fit, which we don't really need for this. And then this little preview here just reinforces the rotation that's going to be applied to all the images. And then I can go here, I can say, okay, let's go ahead and click to save to this folder. I'm already in the Mars folder. So maybe let's select that, and let's maybe call it test. So we're going to the Mars folder under a test folder. And I can choose, do I want TIFF, PNG, do I want JPEG for saving the files? And And then I can also create an animation. So I'm going to do, let's see, let's do a 3/4 of a second difference between the frames. We'll loop it. Let's save it either GIF or WebP. I'll save it as WebP. And then the settings summary, if I click on that, this shows me all of the settings that we work through that will be applied to all of these images. And if I click on Run Batch, it's now going to process all of those files. And then once that's completed, we'll take a look at those images. So I got a message here saying it's done, it's completed. And then I'm going to go ahead, click OK, and bring in that folder. So there's a folder we created. And look at that. All the images are rotated. They've all been processed. And it looks like we've got a animation file created. So let's go ahead and open that. We'll go ahead and open it in one of the browsers. Here, this will do. And then you see there, look at that. We've got a nice animation that's been created for Mars. It's just on a loop, so it'll just keep repeating. Again, the seeing conditions weren't super great, but you can see the effect that you can get using Kepler. I'm going to go ahead and close that. So, and close this as well. So real quick, some other capabilities. If I want to, I can reset. So for example, let's go to that de-rind tab. I can reset the current tab values within this tab if I want to. I can reset all the tab values across all of the workflow if I want to. What I can also do is I can save this as a project. So I can save all those settings in a project file and then open that project file on other images. So that might come in handy as well if you've got multiple workflows that you want to work through. So that's it for Kepler. I've got the link to the download is in the description, and I definitely encourage you to take a look and take it out for a test drive. Thank you.